There is a town in Pennsylvania where the ground breathes, where snow refuses to settle on certain streets, and steam rises out of the hillside on a cold morning like the earth itself is exhaling. On the map, it barely exists anymore. Its zip code was deleted. Its houses were erased. But under the grass, something has been awake since 1962, and it is not finished. Today we're telling the story of Centralia, Pennsylvania, the American town being swallowed, inch by inch, year by year, by the burning mine beneath it. A fire that has outlasted 12 presidents. A fire the government could not kill, so it did something stranger. It killed the town instead. Before we start, if this is the kind of story that stays with you after the video ends, take 2 seconds and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel. And I want to know one thing while you're here. Have you ever stood in a place that felt abandoned before its time? Drop it in the comments. Now, let's go underground. The town that Cole built. To understand how a town gets eaten by its own mine, you have to understand what Centralia was built on, literally. Columbia County, Pennsylvania, sits on the anthracite belt. Hard coal, the purest, hottest burning coal in America. It's the coal that heated the cities of the East Coast for a century, and Centralia sat right on top of it. By the late 1800s, this was a real town. Thousands of people, churches, hotels, saloons, a school. And beneath every one of them, miners were hollowing out the earth. Tunnel after tunnel, seam after seam, generation after generation, until the ground under Centralia was less like solid rock and more like a honeycomb, a dark labyrinth of shafts and chambers running for miles, some of them reaching hundreds of feet down. Here is the detail that matters. When the mining industry collapsed in the mid-1900s, nobody filled those tunnels back in. The companies left. The miners found other work. And the town went on living its quiet life on top of a hollow mountain packed with the most flammable rock on the continent. All it needed was a spark. And in the spring of 1962, Centralia handed it one. May 27, 1962. The date the town died is oddly specific. May 27, 1962. And the cause was not a lightning strike, or an industrial accident, or an act of God. It was a cleanup. Memorial Day was coming, and the town wanted to tidy up. Centralia had a garbage problem, illegal dumps scattered around the borough, so the council had set up an official landfill in an old strip mining pit near the Oddfellow Cemetery. The plan, by most accounts, was simple. Set the trash on fire, burn it down, put it out. Towns did it all the time. But this pit was not just a hole in the ground. It was a wound in the mountain. Beneath the garbage, openings led down into the abandoned mine tunnels, and one of them had never been properly sealed. The burning trash found that gap. The flames slipped through it, down into the dark, and touched a seam of anthracite coal. The firemen doused the surface. They hosed it down. They came back days later and the smoke was still rising. They bulldozed the trash apart and sprayed the layers underneath, still burning. What nobody fully understood yet was that the fire was no longer in the landfill. It had moved into the mine. It was now feeding on the coal itself, in tunnels full of air, protected by hundreds of feet of rock, in a place no fire hose on Earth could reach. The town had lit a fuse running directly into the ground beneath its own homes. And that fuse has been burning ever since. Here's the part of the story that should make you uncomfortable, because it's the most human part. For almost 2 decades, Centralia mostly carried on as if nothing was wrong. The fire crept through the seams below at its own patient pace, a few dozen feet a year. Every few years, someone would try to stop it. Trenches were dug to cut it off. Boreholes were drilled to find its edges. Crews tried flushing the tunnels with wet ash and slurry to smother it. Every attempt was too small, too slow, or too late. And every time, The fire had already slipped past the line drawn to contain it. Engineers eventually calculated that truly digging the whole thing out could cost hundreds of millions of dollars, a number so enormous that decade after decade, the answer was to study it a little longer. Meanwhile, above ground, life went on. Kids walked to school over tunnels that were quietly filling with poison gas. Gardens grew in soil that was warming from below. People noticed the odd things, the strange smell, the patch of ground where snow melted first, and filed them away as quirks of a coal town. Then, in 1979, the town's own mayor found out exactly how bad things had gotten with a dipstick. The boiling gas station John Coddington ran a gas station in Centralia, and he was also the mayor. One day in 1979, he dipped a stick into one of his underground fuel tanks to check the level, and when he pulled it out, the stick felt hot, so he lowered a thermometer down into the tank on a string. The gasoline was 172 degrees Fahrenheit. Sit with that for a second. Not the ground, not the tank, the gasoline itself, thousands of gallons of it, sitting under a working gas station in the middle of a town, was heated to nearly the boiling point of water by the fire moving through the rock below. The station would soon be shut down and become one of the first buildings in Centralia demolished because of the fire. And still, plenty of people stayed, because that is what people do. Home is home, and the fire was invisible, and invisible dangers are easy to argue with. It took a 12-year-old boy on Valentine's Day 1981 to end the argument for good. The day the ground opened, February 14th, 1981. Todd Domboski, 12 years old, was walking through his grandmother's backyard when the earth simply gave way beneath his feet. A sinkhole opened under him, roughly 4 feet across, and reported to plunge as much as 150 feet down into the burning mine. Todd dropped into it and managed to grab hold of a tree root as hot, toxic steam poured up around him. The hole was venting carbon monoxide at lethal concentrations. If he had let go, he would not have been recovered. His cousin, 14-year-old Eric Wolfgang, heard him screaming, ran to the hole, and pulled him out. Think about what that moment revealed. This was not a remote hillside. This was a backyard, in a neighborhood, in an American town, and the ground itself had become a trapdoor over a furnace. When officials examined the hole, the temperatures inside were in the hundreds of degrees. The message could not have been clearer. The fire was no longer beneath Centralia. The fire was inside it, and any street, any yard, any kitchen floor could be next. Todd Domboski's near death made national news, and Washington finally moved, but not in the way you might expect. The government's answer: erase the town. Faced with a fire it could not afford to extinguish, the federal government made a cold, brutally logical decision. If you can't remove the fire from under the town, remove the town from on top of the fire. In the early 1980s, Congress approved more than $42 million, not to fight the fire, but to buy Centralia. House by house, family by family, the government paid people to leave, and most of them took the deal. Over 1,000 residents relocated, and around 500 homes and buildings were torn down. Imagine watching that happen to your hometown. Your neighbor's house comes down on a Tuesday, the corner store the next month. The street you grew up on becomes a row of empty foundations, then a row of empty lots, then just grass with a sidewalk running through it, leading nowhere. Centralia wasn't destroyed the way disaster towns usually are. No floodline, no rubble field. It was deleted, one property at a time, until only the street grid remained, like the chalk outline of a town. But not everyone left, and what the state did next turned a disaster story into something closer to a siege. The holdouts. In 1992, Pennsylvania invoked eminent domain and condemned every building left in Centralia. On paper, the remaining residents were now living in homes that no longer belonged to them. In 2002, the U.S. Postal Service revoked the town's zip code, 17927, one of the quietest ways a country can tell a place it no longer exists. In 2009, the state issued formal eviction notices to the last families, and the last families said no. These were people who had lived their entire lives on those streets. Some argued their side of town was not even over the fire. They fought the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in court for years, a handful of homeowners against the state. And in 2013, remarkably, they won something. The state settled, paying the remaining residents a combined $349,500 and granting them the right to stay in their homes for the rest of their lives. But read the fine print, because it is the coldest clause in this whole story. Those rights die with them. They cannot sell their homes. They cannot pass them down to their children. When each of the last Centralians passes away, the state takes the house and demolishes it. The town is not just dying. It has a legal expiration date, written into a court settlement, measured in human lifespans. Centralia today. So what's actually left right now? In 2026, fewer than a handful of residents. The 2020 census counted 5 people in a borough that held 1,000 as recently as 1980. A few tidy houses standing alone on blocks where 40 homes used to be. A church on the hill, a Ukrainian Catholic church that survives because it happens to sit on solid rock rather than mined-out ground, where worshipers and pilgrims still come, a congregation for a town that's gone. And below all of it, the fire, still burning, 64 years on, working through the coal seams at depths of up to 300 feet, with enough fuel in the ground that estimates for how long it could keep burning range from another century to 250 years or more. It is one of dozens of mine fires still burning under Pennsylvania alone. Centralia is simply the one that ate its town. For years, the town's strange afterlife made it a magnet for visitors. An abandoned stretch of Route 61, buckled and split by the heat below, became the famous Graffiti Highway, a canvas of spray paint winding through the woods. It even helped inspire the fog-choked ghost town of the Silent Hill film. But in 2020, the landowners had had enough, and they buried the entire highway under thousands of tons of dirt. Today, even the town's most famous ruin is itself entombed, a road swallowed on purpose, above a town swallowed by accident. The steam still rises on cold mornings. The ground in the hot zones is still warm to the touch, and the state still warns visitors about the same 3 dangers it has warned about for 40 years: toxic gas, unstable ground, and sinkholes that can open without warning, because the mine is still down there, still hollow, still burning, still slowly digesting the last of what stood above it. What Centralia really is. So here is what this story is really about. Not a fire. Fires, we understand. This is about time, and about the gap between how fast we live and how slowly the ground keeps score. The men who hollowed out the mountain never imagined the tunnels would one day carry fire under their great-grandchildren's homes. The council members who lit a trash pit before Memorial Day were just cleaning up for a holiday weekend. Every step was small, every step was ordinary, and every step was permanent. Centralia will outlast everyone reading this sentence, not the town, but the thing beneath it, long after the last resident is gone. Long after the state tears down the final house and the forest closes over the last of the street grid, the fire will still be moving through the dark down there, patient and indifferent, following the coal wherever it leads. It was there before anyone was watching. It will be there long after there is no one left to watch, burning under an empty hill in Pennsylvania that was, for about 120 years, a place people called home.